Welcome back, everyone, and hope you enjoyed your break, feeling all refreshed. And now let us begin session 1 of the 18th Seoul ODA International Conference. Now this session will be focusing on the outcomes of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development and Korea's Contribution. Session 1 will be moderated by Mr. Park Jong-han, Director General for Development Cooperation Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator and speakers with a big hand. And now I would like to pass over the mic to our moderator. Please proceed.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And maybe I'll be presenting the speakers first to begin the session. To my left, this is Ms. Julia Benn. She is heading the Secretariat for International Forum on TUSD. And to further left, Mr. Schwank, Oliver Schwank. He is the Chief of the Policy Analysis and Development of UN DESA. And to the furthest left, she is Professor Song of Korean National Diplomatic Academy. She used to participate in this session maybe last year together with me. So I'm very much honored to moderate this session again this year with so many participants for this ODA conference. Let me share some of my experiences of participating in the FFD4 meeting, Sevilla, Spain. The preparation for FFD4 was not really, right, I would say. It was a bit gloomy in the leading up to the Sevilla conference, because of so many things happening around the globe, including decline in ODA and many geopolitical tensions, and also we've seen many conflicts that are actually requiring the ODA. But still, the UN and FFD4 managed to conclude very successfully with the participation of many governments as well as other stakeholders. But the conclusion of the Sevilla conference was not really the final end point. We have very much of a task we have to tackle, and that's exactly why Korea is really taking all these tasks and the actions or commitments seriously. And we are very glad to hold this Global Development Cooperation Partnership Week this time. And as I said earlier, the success of the Sevilla conference sent a very strong signal that many still believe in multilateralism in development cooperation. And Korea truly wishes that we can actually move forward this momentum through partnership with all the participants in this room, as well as beyond this room together. In particular, we strongly believe the development effectiveness is not just one agenda of the FFD4, but also it is an agenda that can unlock the potential of development cooperation. And Korean teams have actually made very strenuous efforts to reflect the 4 principles of development effectiveness in the final document, the document called Compromiso de Sevilla, and also some references to the GPD's mechanisms and tools and working relationship with the other international organizations. Now we have 3 excellent speakers who can really give us a broader perspective on financing and development effectiveness and Korea's role in implementing the outcome document of FFD4. So now I would like to invite Ms. Benn to present her ideas on the financing, architecture, and the roles of the trustee. Please.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to really express my sincere thanks to the Korean government for inviting me to speak at this conference. It's really a great honor for me, and it's also an encouragement to the International Forum on TOSSD. I have been allotted 20 minutes to present some trends and outlook on development finance from the perspective of TOSTI. And for those who don't know, so TOSTI stands for Total Official Support for Sustainable Development. It is a standard for tracking international development cooperation in all its forms. It's a comprehensive measure on financing for sustainable development, including but going well beyond ODA. Capturing development support from all providers, whether traditional donors, emerging economies, South-South cooperation providers, or as we call them, dual providers, recipients, and capturing support through all different frameworks of collaboration, including South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, and covering comprehensively all financial instruments, grants, loans, and blended finance, for example. So the discussion today is about the outcomes of the FFD4, the Compromiso de Sevilla, and how to make sure they get implemented. The Compromiso really clearly puts forward the need to reshape the global development finance architecture, and indeed collective actions are needed in this area. So I think all of us probably we are reading and rereading the Compromiso de Sevilla very attentively and identifying the outcomes that are most relevant to our work. So on this slide you see some elements that are really pertinent for the International Forum on TOSTI and that will be guiding the future work of the forum. We see that TOSTI can contribute to the promotion of country-led sustainable development strategies, to inclusive multilateral dialogue on various aspects of international development cooperation. We see that we can support the United Nations in its central role in international development cooperation, and we are building synergies across different platforms and fora, including and importantly through a revitalized development cooperation forum. So these are the elements, if you like, that are stressed in the Sevilla outcome document in the section where the International Forum on TOSTI is also mentioned. The International Forum on TOSTI will also proactively take part in the implementation of Sevilla Platform for Action initiatives. We are joining forces with others to advance interoperable data systems, methodologies to measure development and the need for development support that go beyond GDP. And we also are involved in SPA initiatives to enhance collaboration with philanthropic foundations. So the second part of my presentation is about how we believe TOSTI can achieve greater transparency, alignment and coherence in tracking diverse financing flows through TOSTI. Now, the first element that I would like to highlight here is that the International Forum on TOSTI gives voice to developing countries to shape the measurement of development finance so that it meets their needs. This slide, you see the governance structure of the International Forum on TOSTI, with on the top the General Assembly comprising of all members, observers and all data reporters. Then we have a steering group which is comprised of traditional providers, dual providers, recipients and recipient countries in equal numbers, and the international organizations also have a seat in the steering group. There are two permanent observers, UNCTAD is one of them, and the CSOs, civil society organizations, are the other. We have two co-chairs, one from the north and one from the south, positions that are currently held by the European Union and South Africa. And there are 2 points that I would really like to stress in this situation. First is the balanced composition of the steering group, which by the way, it existed already with the international task force that was developing the TOSTI methodology. But this balanced composition, it makes really a huge difference to the discussions on measurement. And then the second point to stress is the independence of the International Forum on TOSTI from the OECD on substance. We are very grateful to the OECD for hosting the TOSTI Secretariat. It makes sense given the synergies between TOSTI and DAC statistics, and it's a cost-effective solution. But it is hugely important to stress that the International Forum on TOSTI is independent from the OECD and from the Development Assistance Committee. On this slide, you see the membership of the forum on 15th of September. It should say 2025 and not 2024. My apologies for that. There are 32 members, of which 9 are members of the DAC. There's 1 donor from the Gulf region, 4 multilateral organizations, and the majority of our members are actually developing countries. You also see here that the names of the observers to the forum on the right-hand side of the slide. As I mentioned, all countries and organizations that report data to the TOSTI framework are invited to attend the General Assembly of the forum, and here you see the increasing number of reporters of data to the TOSTI framework. There were 126 countries and multilateral organizations reporting on TOSTI in 2023. Our next General Assembly meeting will be hosted by the Spanish government in Madrid at the end of October. And the key topic of discussions there will be indeed a reflection on how the FFD agenda might adjust the way the TOSTI is serving the international development finance community. Now, I would like to present to you some TOSTI data. This is really a snapshot to give you an idea of the scope of the framework and to inspire you to go on the online systems, TOSTI.org, TOSTI online, to do your own analysis. And also to check the individual activities and projects which are behind this aggregate data. So on this slide, you see the TOSTI headline figures that we always present separately. For cross-border flows to developing countries, that was 338 billion USD in 2023. Global and regional expenditures, including spending on international public goods, 133 billion in 2023. And mobilized private finance, always shown separately, not to mix official and private finance, USD 73 billion in 2023. So we now have 5 years of TOSTI data. Soon there will be 6 years. So it starts to become an interesting source for analyzing trends in development finance. The data are always presented, kind of the main figures are always presented on gross disbursement basis, but net flows are available too. And on the right-hand side, you see a chart showing a breakdown between concessional and non-concessional support to developing countries recorded in TOSTI. Here maybe I can mention that the TOSTI framework uses the World Bank IMF definition of concessionality, which is different from that used in ODA. This slide then shows trends in cross-border flows to developing countries by main sectors, and you will see that humanitarian aid is really on the rise. On the right-hand side, you see the geographical breakdown of humanitarian assistance. And if you look at it a bit more closely, you will see that there's clearly the flows to Ukraine that are importantly increasing this trend. Now, the message on this slide is really important. TOSTI reflects international development cooperation in all its forms. It therefore expands the understanding of development support by all providers. On the left, you see a sector breakdown of South-South cooperation to Egypt. This is information that I would say is really unique in TOSTI. And it can be shown separately as in this chart, but it can be also shown next to traditional donor support. The important point here is what's written on the top of the charts. TOSTI measures support from the recipient perspective. It is not a donor effort measure and does not reduce the role of ODA. And it is really this two-pillar system that we have on cross-border flows, capturing support to developing countries, and then another category we call TOSTI Pillar 2, capturing global and regional expenditures that are reportable for sustainable development. That is a way to ensure that actually the cross-border flows are accurately reflecting what is provided to developing countries. This one I think I will skip in the interest of time. Let's see. So, moving from the data to how TOSTI enhances the transparency of development support, here I have included 3 examples or work streams. The first one being the SPA initiative, Bridging Data Systems for Financing for Development. So this initiative was put forward by the TOSTI Secretariat together with the International Aid Transparency Initiative and the UN Chief Executive Board Secretariat that is responsible for collecting financial data from all the UN entities. And the aim here is to make data or reporting systems speak to each other to reduce countries' and organizations' reporting burden and to maximize efficiencies in workflows, acknowledging that each system has its own purpose, its raison d'etre, and the specific communities that it serves. The second aspect highlighted here is the contribution of TOSTI to increase transparency through the global SDG indicator framework. TOSTI is a data source for indicator 17.3.1, additional financial resources mobilized for developing countries from multiple sources. And we submit these data to the UN Statistics Division each year, but we also then disseminate the same information at the activity level. And that increases transparency. TOSTI is also helping to broaden reporting by South-South cooperation providers under the UN Voluntary Conceptual Framework to measure South-South cooperation. We have adopted that methodology in the TOSTI framework, and up to date, 17 South-South cooperation providers have included or submitted data to TOSTI in this context. And then the third element here is to recall that TOSTI is also a data source for monitoring some of the global commitments. There is the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, UN Global Compact for Refugees, and currently we are working or encouraging countries to use TOSTI for their integrated national financing frameworks and their voluntary national reviews for the high-level political forum. Now, very quickly, one of the innovative features of TOSTI is to give developing countries the opportunity to review the data on support they receive and signal through what we call the recipient data review mechanism any issues they see. This responds to a long-standing request by developing countries to ensure that development finance statistics accurately reflect the support they receive, in terms of volumes, in terms of the characteristics of the operations. We piloted the mechanism in 2024 and have launched it just after Seville. The first step in the review is for recipients to review some overview statistics, standardized charts on the cross-border flows to their countries, including mobilized private finance. Also, you see an example on the slide for those overviews. Then the TOSTI standard reflects the perspectives of developing countries, also in terms of the measurement methodology. One of the important agreements reached by the forum in 2024 was the use of multidimensional criteria to define the list of TOSTI recipients, which defines the scope of the statistical framework. The criteria reflect progress on the economic, social and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. We've copied here the formulation from the Compromiso de Sevilla to show that we are really aligned with that. And the indicators that we are using, and this starts now from 2025 onwards, they are GNI per capita, of course, but then also UNDP's Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, the UN Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, and the Notre Dame Global Adaptation Index for the environmental dimension. And here I can tell you that it was really critical for having the developing countries, middle-income countries around the table to make sure that we reach agreement on this issue. It was a very rich discussion, and we are really pleased to have managed to conclude it. I think I will skip this one again in the interest of time. I have 4 minutes left. So I'm getting to the end of my presentation. There's one more slide, and it's about the collective actions that are needed to reshape the global development finance architecture in line with the Compromiso de Sevilla. So we believe that TOSDI can enhance national ownership, transparency, and inclusive coordination in international development cooperation. With regards to national ownership, the key aspects of TOSDI are the forum as the inclusive governance arrangement that defines how development finance should be measured and where developing countries participate in decision-making on an equal footing with donors. The recipient data review mechanism and, importantly, the recipient perspective as the point of measurement in the data, they also enhance national ownership. On enhancing transparency, I would put forward the fact that TOSDI data are available at activity level for everyone, and the two-pillar system provides more accurate information on what developing countries receive. And transparency is also enhanced by the broader scope of TOSDI in terms of recipients. And then finally, regarding inclusive coordination, TOSDI can make a huge contribution given that the framework presents a full picture of official and officially supported financing for development, all providers, all instruments. It thus fosters the whole of government approach to development finance, both in developing countries and provider countries. And I would say that the big question that we will be dealing with in the coming months and years is whether the International Forum on TOSDI should also, or could also help to track and therefore encourage pure private finance for sustainable development. So I hope this presentation has given you some insights to TOSDI. I will really be happy to respond to any questions you may have. And thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you, Jong-han, for being part of your panel.
Thank you, Julia. And as you said earlier, you have limited your presentation exactly to 18 minutes. Thank you for that. And I'm very much impressed by the approach of TOSDI in terms of its inclusiveness as well as the comprehensiveness of the whole data, especially. I mean, it's really covering far beyond the classical ODA, and also your methodology of getting developing country partners involved, especially in data quality review. I mean, it really impressed me. And these are three pillars that TOSDI can contribute to implementing the FFD4. I mean, that is national ownership, transparency, and inclusive coordination. All these remind me of the effectiveness principles of GPDC. So that leads us to the next presentation by Mr. Schwank. And I'd like to invite Mr. Schwank to give the presentation on what UN has been doing, as well as the general picture of our Compromiso de Sevilla. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd also like to start by thanking our hosts, the government of Korea and KOICA, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to speak to you about the Sevilla conference, F54, and I want to talk about three aspects of that. First, a quick recap of what happened in Sevilla and what we see. I'm from the Secretariat, so this is of course a member states agreement, but we followed it very closely. What we see as the key outcomes of the Sevilla commitment, the agreed outcome document. Secondly, then I want to talk about, put that in the broader context of the development cooperation, the situation we are in right now in that area, and how the Sevilla commitment responds to the pressures on development cooperation that we see right now. And then as a third part, I will conclude with putting some open questions that I think we still have to address and that we need to think about as a community concerned with these questions going forward. But let me start with Sevilla and what happened in Sevilla. Here you go. So I see many familiar faces, so I know many of you were in Sevilla, so I don't need to spend too much time talking about the conference itself. As somebody said, I think there was some trepidation in the preparations about what such a conference can achieve in this very challenging moment, but there was, I think many people went away from it energized. So I think it did prove its value to bring the entire world, the community that works on these issues together, and there was a lot of, I think, positive energy that these issues are still relevant and that many, many people all around the world are working to take them forward. The specific outcomes of the conference are two. One is, of course, the outcome document, the Sevilla commitment, or Compromiso de Sevilla, which was adopted by consensus by all member states present. So more than 190 of the UN memberships adopted the Sevilla commitment. And then there were already several mentions of the Sevilla Platform for Action. So in addition to this agreed and negotiated outcome document, many coalitions of countries, of institutions, of stakeholders put forward initiatives in this Platform for Action that are very often directly linked to agreements in the document that then hopefully will help us to implement the document quickly and early. So in total, there's 130 such initiatives, some of which have already been mentioned today. What is substantively in the Sevilla commitment? This is, of course, a very big document. Those of you who have read it will be very aware. It's quite long. There are 7 action areas, many detailed commitments in there, but we try to summarize or characterize it across 3 key steps. First is catalyze investment at scale to help close the SDG investment gap. Second, address the debt and sustainable development crisis that so many countries are affected by right now. And third, support reform of the architecture. That's mostly the international financial architecture, but there also is quite a bit of thinking in there around national development cooperation architectures. I'm going to speak to each of them very briefly, but I want to focus on items that are particularly relevant for us thinking about development cooperation. When you think about the first part, catalyze investment to close the $4 trillion financing gap that's been mentioned already, there's a headline commitment to triple MDB lending, which would go quite some way in helping close these financing gaps. There is a commitment to double support to countries to increase their tax to GDP ratios and to get to a minimum of 15% of GDP. If that were achieved, again, we did some calculations in-house. We are talking about, not quite trillions, but you're getting close to trillions if we really managed to help all countries get to this floor of tax to GDP ratios. And doubling support to countries to do this. And then thirdly, for the investment gap, as several speakers have already mentioned, the critical importance of mobilizing private investment and a big focus on getting that right, on making sure that blended finance works and works with impact. Now, I think all of these three have a clear link to development cooperation, even to ODA. ODA can play a role, or does play a role, in all three of these headline commitments. And I think all three also speak to the catalytic role of development cooperation that speakers have already mentioned. It's about not just the transfer of resources, but using this scarce concessional resource to help countries mobilize additional resources. Partly that's mobilizing private investment, but the first two are actually about helping to mobilize additional public financing, which is so critical to fund public goods, using the best lever that we have, which is the multilateral development banks, to mobilize financing and scale, and enabling countries to mobilize more public revenue domestically. The second area of focus is the debt crisis. It's probably the number one priority that developing countries brought to the conference, and the Sevilla commitment has a pretty ambitious package of commitments to address the debt and development crisis, around debt crisis prevention, around bringing down the cost of capital and helping those countries right now that are faced with very high borrowing costs, that are priced out of markets. And then thirdly, the debt architecture, improving the restructuring processes, but also enhancing the voice and representation of developing countries in these discussions around debt, through a debtors club, through a UN process on debt. I think there is a link to development cooperation, to the provision of cash concessional finance. Some argue that because the provision of concessional finance was too limited, that is part of the reason why countries had to go to markets and are now at risk of or in debt distress. I think that's debatable, but what's clear is that the current debt crisis is adding to the pressures on development cooperation. It means that a lot of the concessional finance that multilaterals provide at the moment is used to repay expensive commercial debt. It means that a lot of countries that are at high risk of debt distress, when they go to the concessional windows of the MDBs, can only get grant financing, and it really adds to the pressures on concessional finance. And so if we do not address the debt crisis, it's very hard to see also how we can use development cooperation concessional finance to its best effect. And then the third, let me go to the next slide, the third bucket of actions is around architecture reform. Again, that's a very high priority that many developing countries bring to the UN processes on financing to enhance their voice and representation. A lot of this is about governance in the international financial institutions, but again, there is a strong link to development cooperation too. There is a strengthening of the UN role in the global discussions around development cooperation, and there is a very deliberate rethinking of how the national architectures should look like, and how we can make sure that countries are in the driver's seat when, in the provision of development financing around a new generation of country platforms. I'll get to that towards the end of my presentation. So that's what's in the Sevilla commitment. I want to now zoom in a bit on the issue of development cooperation and some of the more specific actions on this topic. The DACCHA has laid out very clearly, so I will not repeat the context that we are in. We're in a context of rising unmet financing needs, so rising demands on development cooperation, and at the same time, there's a lot of pressure on the supply side, reductions in ODA budgets. So that's the challenging context that we are in, and I have a few charts on this, but this is where I think can save some time. So you're all familiar with the global financing gap, which has been increasing really significantly, especially after the pandemic or since the pandemic, and at the same time, the worrying trends in the provision of the core resource on concessional finance, ODA. So there's a concern around the quantity of concessional finance being provided, but the pressures are also expressing themselves in concerns or in negative outcomes on the quality of development financing. So you can see, for example, in the provision of development financing by the MDBs, that the level of concessionality the share of concessional financing as total is decreasing, so more of the funding is provided on non-concessional terms. That might well increase in the coming years as the MDBs have to stretch, or under pressure to stretch their balance sheets more. Less of ODA is actually receiving recipient, is arriving in recipient countries. More of it is used for other purposes. And on the effectiveness agenda, you are all very familiar with this. We see a larger number of providers, smaller average size of projects, which adds to transaction costs and goes counter to some of the long-standing effectiveness principles. That's the situation we are in and the difficulties we are facing. How does Sevilla respond to this? I would say in development cooperation, there are commitments in 3 buckets. First is around quantity, of course. Second is around quality and effectiveness. Some of you will have noticed that the name of this action area has actually changed. So we used to call this International Development Cooperation. It's now called International Development Cooperation and Development Effectiveness. So there was a very deliberate choice by negotiators and reflects the emphasis put on quality and effectiveness of development cooperation. So there's quantity, quality, and then there's also commitments around the architecture. Let me run through very briefly some of these. So on the quantity, there's of course commitments to reverse declining trends in ODA. Now, I think we've heard several speakers have already mentioned that it's unlikely to happen in the short run, but it's still important that as an international community, there was a recommitment to make our best effort to reverse that trend. And there's commitments around the quality of ODA, ensuring that more of ODA is programmed at the country level and aligned with developing country priorities. There's a strong language, strong commitments around enhancing South-South cooperation and including encouragement of scaling up such cooperation. And then I've already mentioned there are some really big headline commitments around multilateral development banks, working towards a potential tripling in MDB lending, but also improving the quality of their lending. For example, for the MDBs to make more efforts to provide financing in local currencies. Let me go to the effectiveness part, strengthening development effectiveness. The principles, the long-standing principles around development effectiveness are reaffirmed in the Sevilla commitment. There's quite specific commitments to try and reduce fragmentation that I had mentioned earlier, a reaffirmation that providers should use national systems, respond to country plans, but also to prioritize provision of aid through the multilateral system and to use the horizontal providers that can lever their balance sheets, such as the multilateral development banks, more effectively. And finally, so we talked about quantity, quality. The third aspect is around architecture. And Julia had already mentioned there are 2 dimensions to this. There's the global dimension of how and where we all come together as an international community to think about and take forward these commitments. And there is a reaffirmation of the role of the UN as a space for that dialogue, but also an invitation and encouragement for all the initiatives and providers, recipients to use that platform and come together and bring the knowledge, the work that's happening at all levels together in this inclusive platform for dialogue. And then at the country level, a very strong emphasis on country leadership, which is built on this long-standing understanding that we really need countries to have good plans in place, and then support can align around these priorities and plans. And as a modality to improve that, country platforms to bring providers together around these national priorities. Now, those platforms, that's not a new idea. They exist. There's a new iteration of country platforms. Some work really well, others don't work so well. I think that's well understood, but they are one interesting modality that could help put in practice these principles that we all agree to around ownership, around alignment. So that's the package in Sevilla. Now, as somebody already said, Sevilla is not the end of the discussion, it's just one milestone, and it certainly hasn't addressed all the challenges and questions that we face. And so I wanted to put on the table a few questions that, let me skip that. A few questions that I think we all, as the community working on thinking about these issues, have to focus on in the coming years, post-Sevilla. And responding to the stresses that development cooperation is under. I've clustered them in two buckets. I'm sure there are many more questions one could raise, but I thought I'll put these two on the table. First, there's this discussion ongoing in many different fora, expert groups. There's many initiatives thinking about the broader narrative of development cooperation. What is the purpose of international development cooperation in today's world? And then downstream from that, how should we allocate this very scarce resource best? The Sevilla commitment has some implicit answers to this, but it certainly doesn't have all the answers. And in fact, the negotiating process, I think, brought out some of the tensions and unresolved questions quite clearly. So there's, of course, there's different understandings of this. ODA, development cooperation, is a form of charity. It is a form of international solidarity, but there's also increasingly a narrative that we provide such support also in our own interest. So it's a cooperation that is of mutual interest. And then, related to that, what should be the focus of our cooperation? Is it poverty? Is it enabling countries to grow? Is it even beyond that, enabling convergence, so enabling a catching up of the developing with the developed world? Or is it also about the provision of global public goods? That's, of course, increasingly on our minds as these global systemic shocks hit more and more countries. And then, as I said, downstream from that, once we've answered that question, that would also shape how we allocate scarce concessional finance. Now, Sevilla has a few pointers there, but it also very clearly brought out that we don't fully agree on all of this. And I think that's what we need to focus on. I think a shared starting point would be the focus on poverty, on leaving no one behind. I think that's a shared understanding. That's what recipient countries want, and providers of development cooperation agree. And to maybe slightly lesser extent, but also that development cooperation can really be a catalyst for growth, for job creation. Now then we get to the question of should it also be used to support the provision of global public goods? And that's, I think, where we have to be honest. We do not have a shared understanding on this question, and that's something, even after Sevilla, we still need to think about. One thing that came out very clearly, I think, that is a partial response to this, though not a full response, is that if you look at the agreement, there is a lot of focus on capacity support. So the developing countries really brought as a very high priority this desire to, self-reliance is a strong term, but to be capacitated to respond to today's challenges themselves. That's why there's so much focus on capacity support for tax, for example. And of course, that is in part also a response to addressing new global challenges, global public goods. So maybe that's a partial response to this, but I think we have to be honest that that's something we still need to work on further and need more discussions and dialogue on. The second bucket of items is on the effectiveness agenda. Now here I think it's less a question of us disagreeing. I think the principles are well accepted by all partners, but in practice, we're clearly struggling to advance on them. Despite these principles being around for 20 plus years, we seem to be regressing on them. So how do we actually deliver these around country ownership, greater coherence, reversing fragmentation in practice? these are becoming harder to implement precisely because of some of the pressures in donor countries. And while, Sevilla reaffirmed those commitments, I don't think it gave us a clear answer to how do we reconcile this with the very practical pressures that donor countries are under, that taxpayers, are asking of suppliers of development finance. So I think there's this shared starting point around these principles, but there's a lot of work to be done of how do we make sure that they inform practice and don't remain principles on paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm not sure whether presenters are allowed to put forward questions rather than take questions, but still, your set of questions will actually invigorate and provoke the discussions today, as well as the Busan Forum discussions. And thank you for the gist of what really happened in Sevilla, Spain. I would like to really take away a few about your slides to use in my presentation to others as well. I mean, if you don't really insist on the intellectual property on your slides. Anyway, I'm very much impressed again his insights on what kind of tasks that we have ahead of us to implement the outcome of Sevilla. And you mentioned the fragmentation issue when you discuss the development effectiveness. This is something that Korea has been actually struggling to really improve the quality of our ODA to development partner countries. So I guess this leads us to the final presentation by Professor Song on Korea's roles in moving forward this effectiveness agenda, or how to address the fragmentation. Can you take the floor? Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and KOICA for kindly extending the invitation for me to join this very meaningful event. It's always tough to be the last speaker because all the important things have been said prior to you, and you have to think of what kind of value added you can provide. So my topic, my presentation will focus on Korea's contribution to financing for development, particularly speaking from what is Korea or my takeaway from the 4th Financing for Development Conference, and what areas Korea can focus on to strategically contribute to a more effective and coordinated financing for development. So my interpretation of the Financing for Development Conference is as follows. I believe, as mentioned during the opening ceremony and the previous presentations, it not only reaffirmed multilateral commitment towards mobilizing different development finance and also achieving the sustainable development goals, but I believe that the outcome document has and will provide normative guideline for different development partners in terms of development finance. And second is, as you have seen from the outcome document, it goes beyond international development cooperation to include multiple issues ranging from domestic resource mobilization, domestic and international private finance, debt, science, technology, innovation, etc., and as well as international development cooperation. So I believe not only is it a normative guideline for financing, for development finance, but it also includes a very comprehensive and multi-level agenda that can be taken from global, regional, national, and local level. And I think the third important aspect of the conference was that it provided a venue for the partners or like-minded partners and countries to come together and work on specific agenda and tasks to not only realize or realize the outcome document, but achieve the SDGs by 2030. And last but not least, it also signaled the importance of a very strong political and financial commitment from both development partners and partner countries to realize and to actually implement the outcome document, because there is a lot of agenda and tasks included in the outcome document, but in order to actually put it into practice will require a very strong commitment from both the practice level, from the leadership level, in terms of both finance and political will. And I think another thing that has been stated again and again is the importance of key development cooperation effective principles. I understand that we'll be talking more about it in the last session through GPDC, but if we take a look at, the different global discussions on aid effectiveness to effective development cooperation, we see similar and same principles as the guiding and underlying principles to realize sustainable development in the last 20 plus years. And I think, as mentioned by the previous speaker, we also see the changing role in the official development assistance. So one thing that struck to me, and particularly because Korea is also participating as a lead implementing country in one of the 130 action-oriented initiatives, was the announcement of 130 initiatives to implement the outcome document, which are very much action-oriented partnership initiatives that are based on the experience, comparative advantage, leadership, and interest of countries that participate as leading countries or participating countries of respective initiatives. And I believe that these individual initiatives provide a very concrete and specific plans to specific items that might have been watered down in the final outcome document during the process of negotiation. And also by having multiple countries and organizations as the lead implementing agencies, it has promoted and called for stronger partnership among like-minded countries, and also call for coalition of willing countries on specific items. Then what are some of the key challenges? I think one thing, maybe more from the donor country perspective, is that while the outcome document does include multiple agenda, ranging from, again, public finance to private finance, trade, debt, governance, etc., we also see that there is still very different views among different stakeholders. While the finalized outcome document was adopted based on consensus, we do notice that there are certain disagreeing views on certain items, with certain donors disassociating themselves from certain clauses and items, and how to bridge the gap of this different understanding will continue to become a challenge. Second thing is, I wonder if we are really speaking a different language or if we are speaking the same language. I think as highlighted in the keynote speech, we have the same ultimate goal. We have the consensus on achieving sustainable and stronger development effectiveness as the end point. But I believe in the process of achieving that final objective, we do have slight differences in our positions, in our philosophies, effective approaches, and principles in terms of doing development cooperation. And I believe not only this conference, but also the Busan Forum that we'll have in the coming days will be a great opportunity to bring in different development partners and understand each other's understanding of how they view development cooperation and narrowing the differences in understanding. And third is the shifting domestic interest and context. This was also highlighted multiple times, but how can we sustain the effort for not only implementing this outcome document, but also the SDGs until and after 2030, especially when considering the changing domestic dynamics in donor countries? How can we come up with a new narrative to persuade the public that development cooperation is and will continue to be a vital finance to achieve sustainable development. And the last would be the importance of multilateral and multi-stakeholder partnership. And all of these key challenges will need to be resolved and discussed to ensure full implementation of the outcome document and the SDGs by 2030, but also beyond. So I would like to spend some time introducing Korea's strategy toward development cooperation, especially under the current administration. So in September, so just this month, the new government has announced 123 national policy tasks, which I believe is only has not yet been translated into English. But the national goal of the national policy tasks is pragmatic diplomacy for national interest. And out of the 123 national policy tasks, the 120th task is becoming G7 plus diplomatic powerhouse through international contribution and participation, of which the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the main ministry in charge of implementing the said task. And this goal, this policy task entails specific goals, including expanding and diversifying Korea's diplomacy and its areas, providing responsible contribution to global challenges, and strengthening the role of diplomatic missions abroad. And some of the detailed tasks would include to develop the new Southern and new Northern policy, expanding diplomacy landscape with the Global South, promoting more strategic partnership with like-minded countries across different regions, and responding to global challenges, including but not limited to peace and security, climate, environment, cyber, and human rights. And last but not least, promote comprehensive and effective ODA for improving both quantitative and qualitative ODA, and also from a strategic and institutional perspective. One item that I would like to highlight is in terms of responding to global challenges, which will include utilization of ODA. This is not only limited to providing strategic finance, but also contributing to forming global norms. And I believe since the response to global challenges will include multiple partnership across Global South, North, the ODA will play an integral role in achieving this task. And of course, just to shed light on Korea's ODA strategy, Korea has 5-year midterm strategy, and the government is now in the process of developing and finalizing the 4th midterm strategy for the following 5 years. So that was the introduction to the current government's approach to global development and also development cooperation. Now I would like to explain a bit on how Korea has contributed throughout the years in terms of development finance. And I believe there was contribution from 2 different aspects. One is in terms of normative development, and second, actually providing the development finance. As we will again discuss more in detail in the last session of today's conference, as well as in the following 2 days of Busan Forum, Korea has actively engaged in implementing, but also bringing in different partners to implement the aid effectiveness principles, notably the GPDC. So there was the role contribution to actually discussing the principles, but also providing opportunities for different stakeholders to come together and discuss their experiences, but also implementing in terms of Korea's ODA, and trying to expand this principle to other development partners and partner agencies. In terms of finance, of course, there's a traditional development finance of ODA. We're in the process of readjusting our ODA, but over the mid to long term, Korea is still committed to increasing its aid. And second is to engage with the private sector to mobilize private finance, while also coming up with different innovative finance. And I believe that this could only happen based on partnership resource, and commitment. And of course, partnership, this refers to domestic partnership, but also international partnership, actual resource referring to actually mobilizing public finance and also private finance. And third, there being a strong commitment towards sustainable development from both practice level but also at leadership level. So I would like to conclude with some of my own thoughts in terms of the way forward for Korea to further contribute to mobilizing development finance. And I think first is that there should be continued commitment towards the traditional finance of ODA. As mentioned in both the outcome document and by other speakers, it is the fundamental source of finance for poverty eradication and for human rights and so on. And the outcome document also stresses the importance of reaching the 0.7 ODA GNI. And second is the diversification of development finance. Korea will need to come up with different approaches to mobilize different development finance, perhaps having a follow-up to the canceled air ticket solidarity levy, or testing out different mechanisms that have been suggested by other donors, such as debt for development swap approaches, or pooled fund or matching fund, or any other types that Korea could consider implementing over mid to long term. And third would be domestic policy coherence for sustainable development. In addition to the fragmentation issue, I believe the outcome document does suggest the need to not only look at international development cooperation, but also look at other areas that is interlinked to development cooperation. As the outcome document suggests, international development cooperation is mentioned not only as a standalone chapter, but it is mentioned as an important tool of implementation, as an instrument to accomplish the targets or goals mentioned in other chapters. And that would mean, from also donor perspective, that there should be more coherence among ODA and non-ODA areas within Korea. And fourth would be stronger strategic domestic and global partnership. As the outcome document suggests, there is the mention of a stronger role for the United Nations, but also for KOICA, for Korea as a responsible donor. Korea needs to continuously engage in multiple platforms, from OECD to UN, GPDC, etc. And that will mean having global partnership at different fora. And another, from the domestic aspect, this will include bringing in different public and private actors, which is again linked to the policy coherence. And next would be managing and showing results for stronger support domestically and also internationally. Again, unfortunately, the public support for Korea's aid has been somewhat of a decreasing trend over the last couple of years. And so it's an imperative task for the government to persuade the public of why ODA is needed at this point in time, and how it is of mutual interest for both Korea and its partner countries. And at the same time, for instance, in terms of aid effectiveness or development effectiveness principles, not only should we communicate and persuade with other actors on why it's important to focus on these effectiveness principles, but also show that implementing these principles actually work in terms of promoting, in terms of stronger development impact. And thus, all of these efforts should be much more coherent and coordinated to promote sustainable development of present and future. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jisun. And before actually taking on what Professor Song has presented to us, I'd like to really remind you all of your questions. You can put forward your questions through the system that was announced before. So we are taking the questions through the app. And wearing my official hat of DG for Development Cooperation of Foreign Ministry, I'd like to really supplement a few things in terms of Korea's policy in the future. I mean, we are, as Professor Song presented, we are in the process of reshaping our whole 5-year plan that will be implemented from the start of next year for the 5 years. And one of the focus of the policy directions that we are actually taking out of this new administration is to address the fragmentation within our own ODA system. When lots of Korean government agencies as well as private sectors are really providing different types of assistance to the developing countries, and it's actually causing a huge confusion on the scene in the local context. That's exactly why we are trying to really reshape or reform our own ODA system to provide the quality ODA and even beyond the ODA. So that's there. And we have actually gathered a number of questions to the presenters. Let me just... This question's to Julia. So can you take up the question on the screen?
Yes, thank you very much. How does TOSTI ensure transparency and comparability when tracking diverse forms of international development cooperation, especially beyond traditional ODA? So how do we do this? I mean, the basis really is discussions together with all the stakeholders around the table on the measurement standard. So this can be very technical discussions on the methodologies to be used in measuring development finance, but it is also a discussion about what can everybody report upon. And this is, I think, where TOSSD comes in, because if you like, the traditional ODA system has been there for many, many years. I have personally been very much involved in the running of the ODA system. And it has very good basis for collecting high-quality data on development cooperation. But looking at it in its entirety, it's kind of too complicated to be applied for the entire development provider as well. So this is where the International Forum comes in. We have kind of gone through all the various aspects of development finance. What is it that one really needs to know about development cooperation activities at the global level, and then agreed on how to include that in the reporting framework. And that kind of simplicity and this discussion with everybody around the table, to me, that's what ensures the comparability. That's also what ensures the transparency of the system, going well beyond traditional ODA. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I guess this inclusive approach of TOSTI is really important, I guess, and as Karsten this morning announced, DAC is also taking on reforms to be more inclusive in collecting and also promoting their own data on ODA. So, I mean, we have a certain convergence here to be more inclusive in collecting the data, in calculating data, as well as in actually putting the data in action, into action. Thank you, Julia. And this question is for Oliver. It's really hard for the presenters to digest the question and then prepare the answers. You really have to allow us some time.
Yeah. No, thank you for that question. No, it's a very good question. So I do have one answer to this, which is at the national level. I mentioned earlier the country platforms. There's a modality that's suggested in the severe commitment to organize development cooperation around at the national level. So, which, you know, in theory, you would have a country putting its place, its strategy and plan, and then the platform is the place where all various providers can come together and coordinate the support around this national plan. Now, in practice, I think what this question gets at is that in practice, there is, of course, a power relationship, a power dimension to these relationships that's not explicitly addressed in just setting up a country platform. And if it's unaddressed, then such a country platform can indeed become a place for donor collusion, right? Where donors might have even more influence, and it could, rather than strengthening country ownership, it could undermine it. I think that's a very difficult problem to solve. There are certain realities here that cannot easily be overcome, but one proposal that is also in the severe commitment is that these platforms need to include more national partners. So, you know, one that is explicitly mentioned are national development banks. And in this newer generation of country platforms, the ones that have been successful are ones where there were also strong national institutions, such as a national development bank, that can provide a real counterweight, that has substantive expertise, and that can really help have a balanced discussion between the providers and the recipient. Now those institutions don't exist in all countries, but this is, you know, one promising way to go. And there's, I mean, across different action areas, there's an understanding that such national financing institutions are a very promising part of the architecture that would need to be, that we should strengthen, and we should support these institutions, and it can help also respond to this challenge.
Yeah, yes, there is maybe not yet that kind of system to really provide level playing field kind of atmosphere in the negotiations with the large development banks or multilateral organizations. But it's something we really have to work on in the future. I guess that's what you have alluded to. And next question is put forward to Professor Song. It's very long, two-part question.
Not only long, but very difficult to read. So, in terms of the first question, what is the most urgent task in terms of strengthening coherence? I believe the first answer that comes to mind is better coordination within the ODA field, and also at a higher level, ODA field and other areas. So, for instance, we do have mechanisms set in place to reduce fragmentation at project level, to strengthen synergies and reduce any duplication. MOFA is in charge of the said platform. My apologies for not remembering the name of the meeting in Korean, but I think one is that there has to be stronger coordination within the ODA, and after that happens, we can utilize the platform that we have now, which is the Committee for Sustainable National Committee for Sustainable Development, which I believe is in principle to be chaired by the president. And since we have this mechanism set in place that entails the participation of a very high-level leadership in overseeing Korea's overall contribution, that includes both ODA and non-ODA, for national and global sustainable development, I think different coordination at different platforms or committees at different levels will be the most urgent task. And of course, this will require a certain control tower, but for ODA, we have not only the platform managed by MOFA, but also the Committee for International Development Cooperation by Prime Minister's Office, and then there's a National Committee for Sustainable Development. So I think we have the mechanism set in place. How this actually works in practice and how much actual coordination happens will be the most urgent task. What differentiated partnership models can Korea propose to effectively collaborate with emerging donors in the Pacific region? My understanding is that Korea is very much interested in promoting triangular partnership, triangular cooperation with emerging donors across the Indo-Pacific and other countries of the Global South. So we can have some of the focal points or focal countries within different specific regions to promote that said triangular cooperation. But also, because Korea has a very... Actually, let me end my comment there. Yeah, that's the only thing that I can think of at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. On, I guess, question number 2, I guess Mikta is going to actually discuss this sort of issues at the meeting, because South-South cooperation is a very big issue, and they are trying to actually develop a model to make use of this South-South cooperation, including Korean agencies. So I guess it's not really, I mean, I don't really think all these questions are really, are the questions with very specific, formulated answers. I guess it's all these questions are sort of open questions that we really have to take on in the discussions. So maybe I have to really bring up the next question before I ask the presenters to answer those questions. This is not a test, so please take time.
So what are the next steps for mainstreaming TOSTI in global development finance discussions? In this context, I would really like to actually thank the UN FFD4 process because that gave the International Forum on TOSTI a lot of opportunities to speak about this new measurement framework with developing countries. So we had many visits actually to New York. We met with the missions there and explain kind of basic things, that some of which I flagged actually in my presentation to the missions, and make very clearly this point about the TOSTI framework not being part of the DAC system. We are hosted by the OECD, but we are independent. And this trust-building exercise, it takes time, but now we see lots of opportunities there. And, for example, the idea of revitalizing the Development Cooperation Forum, that's something that we really want to push forward and have discussions on with you and DESA, for example. And then by presenting more data, more analysis, we believe that little by little we will get mainstreamed. What role can stakeholders play in strengthening the standards? So here, TOSTI is an open, inclusive and transparent system. We very much welcome, all the critique that there can be on what we have achieved so far. If there are things that need to be adjusted, if there are things, specifically for developing countries that don't seem to make sense. If there are problems in the quality of the data. So, I'm there to take all that critique and then see how we can respond to it and make things better going forward. And there are some specific mechanisms that we have put in place for that, but there's also in the book here, you have my email address, so you are welcome to send me an email and we will respond to you to respond to your questions and little by little, do the necessary to improve the standard. The inclusion of civil society in the governance arrangements of TOSTI, that has been very important. And again, I would say it has been a trust-building exercise. At the beginning, we got a lot of, kind of critical voices from them. And I think now, today, civil society is one of the greatest supporters of TOSTI, because we have managed to actually implement some of these principles that, people have been talking about for a long time. Thank you.
Julia, I have actually a follow-up question to
Yes.
that. TOSTI is producing a whole new set of, data in development financing. And DCD has been also providing very solid data. It's just a part of the whole financing resources. But do you see, there are possibilities in the future that many competing agencies are producing different types of data that can actually confuse many people? What's your take on that?
Well, that's where I bring up the objective of doing interoperable data systems. So there the basic idea is that all providers of development finance, whether it is multilateral organizations or countries, traditional donors or South-South cooperation providers, all of them have a system in place nationally to track what they are doing. They need to report to their parliaments on how they are using public funds. So the basic data are there. Then there are lots of different entities in the global international development finance landscape that wish to have this data for various purposes. So DAC is one, ODA is one example. There is specific work for tracking South-South cooperation. We work closely with UNCTAD in that area. There are initiatives like the CEHIP for Latin American countries that have collected South-South cooperation data for many, many years. There are initiatives to track private finance mobilized more specifically. And the challenge is to bring this together without, asking countries, organizations report, 4 or 5 different times the same information. And that's where we need to figure out how can the data systems be made interoperable. And in my experience, there's kind of there's a minimum thing that everybody needs to record to be able to analyze what you are doing in terms of support to developing countries, what you do in terms of funding some of these global challenges. And then there are specificities in each framework. So as long as we can make the common part interoperable, I think we are much better off. And then, life is life. So in some cases, it becomes a bit of a competition type of situation. And then everybody puts forward the benefits of their system. I'm here promoting TOSSD, that is my role. And others will be doing the same for their systems. But I think really the key idea is to make it as easy as possible for countries, including Korea, including countries that we see in this room. So that would be my answer to your question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Life is life. So we'll have to really, that's the direction that we may really have to take. But as you said, it's still a challenge, and it's exactly where partnership is really required on that aspect. I have already brought up the question to Oliver in advance. Can you take on this question?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I feel like I might have answered that question in the first round, but so how do we get to better alignment? Maybe let me say something about, again, the kind of the more global architecture and the national. So on the global side, I do think that strengthening the multilateral system and particularly strengthening the core contributions to multilateral providers that are horizontal providers that can respond to country priorities because they cover the whole range of issues is one way to get to that. It would also, help reduce fragmentation in the system. So keeping multilateral provision of development financing front and center. And then at the country level, I mentioned the country platform. So I do think in a later session, we'll also talk about integrated financing frameworks, which is one way, one tool to help countries develop stronger national strategies, national plans. So supporting countries in putting such credible financing strategies in place, to accompany their national plans, that can then articulate also the needs towards providers is one way. And then on the interaction, the country platforms, I mentioned national development banks as one actor that could be part of those platforms that might help change the dynamics. I think civil society is another important actor in that regard. So if these platforms are transparent, if they involve other stakeholders that can help, also build political pressure on donors to respond to country needs, that might be another way in practice to really fulfill the potential of such platforms.
Oliver, can you briefly touch on the roles of the IC in this kind of a context?
Sorry, the role
RC.
Oh, the resident coordinators, yeah. Right. So the UN system has been trying for the last couple of years to respond to precisely this question, to better coordinate its own activities at the country level. So we have now in place a system of resident coordinators, and these resident coordinators coordinate all UN system entities' contributions to the countries. They provide one entry point to the host countries at the political level, and they also are empowered to coordinate and make sure that the UN systems, the UN family is very large. There are many entities present in many countries, so the resident coordinators are able to coordinate that effort and make sure that it's aligned with country priorities. So there's one framework agreement in place between the UN and host countries. The resident coordinator can ensure that all the members of the UN family that work on specific issues support this broader approach in a coordinated manner. And that's something that we expect, I'm sure many of you are following the discussions around UN 80 very closely. This really is a priority to further strengthen the resident coordinator system. So we are talking about kind of reprioritizing and in some cases maybe cutting the UN footprint, but the resident coordinator system is one area that's clearly prioritized to be strengthened precisely so that the UN can play its own part in reducing fragmentation.
So I guess RC's role, even though we have already launched this discussion in the context of UN 80, I guess RC's role should focus not just on really addressing the fragmentation among the different donors, but also on the partnership or coordination with the recipient countries' institutions. I guess that was the major element in the previous question. So I'd like to really turn to Professor Song to take up this question. And I'm very curious about the answers as well.
Thank you for the very difficult questions. I think in terms of the innovative financing model, the immediate thought that comes to mind is to experiment with some of the existing models that Korea has implemented or other donors are implementing that is fit for purpose. For instance, we can consider placing some tax or finance to private jets and use that development finance mobilized to address climate challenges, or use the previous system or the renewed system of air ticket solidarity levy for the private jet. Or we can also experiment with some of the program-based approaches like the budget support that other countries have tried and see if it also works for Korea. Another type would be something that I believe KOICA is already implementing, like the results-based financing, which I don't know at what scale, but we can test with these different types of financing, and after accumulating certain experience and capacity, perhaps we can expand it to other sectors and other implementing agencies as well. And in terms of the partnership strategy, I think this is somewhat connected to the second question that was asked before. And in addition to the partnership at the ODA project level, another thought was one thing that Korea and the emerging donors have in common is the willingness to share our own development experiences. And I think different countries have different experiences that they would like to share and different areas that they have expertise in. And if Korea can partner with other donors in gathering and sharing these experiences and perhaps initiate some drafting of some report or guideline or recommendation at UN or OECD, this can have a much more expandability or applicability at a global level. So I think in terms of norm and experience-wise, that can be also an area that Korea can partner with other development partners. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to really apologize for my poor moderating job because the presenters have successfully limited their presentations within the given time, but I have exceeded the whole session into a few minutes. But I don't really want to summarize all these valuable presentations within a few minutes. I guess they have already served to provoke the discussions today as well as tomorrow. And there are a couple of things that actually strike out, in the discussions. We have challenges that may need some innovative ideas and also require the partnership. And we will have to bear in mind the whole picture of development financing, including the quality and the effectiveness of development cooperation. I guess I will leave it here, and I'd like to really thank all the presenters for the excellent presentations and the interactive discussions with the participants. And I'd like to really wish you, the speakers as well as the participants, a very good day here in Korea, where you can enjoy very crispy temperatures and air. That's really the only different part of our experiences in Sevilla, Spain, because it was scorching hot in Spain. It went up far above 40 degrees Celsius. But still, here in Korea, you can enjoy very nice weather, and I have actually asked people to enjoy the nice weather throughout this whole week, so that you can have very comfortable stay in Seoul. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, moderator, for skillfully facilitating the discussion, and thank you, speakers, for sharing your very valuable insights. Ladies and gentlemen, please give another big round of applause to our moderator and speakers. Thank you.